You set my world on fire. You're my heart's desire.
Delish. Hi everyone, welcome back to another probably long-awaited video update regarding our lives in terms of TTC, where we are with the endometriosis and this whole entire weird quarantine lifestyle that we've got going on. So the laparoscopy itself went well, I would say. The day ran pretty much exactly the same as the last time I had the procedure done. The same sort of going in really early, seeing the anaesthetist, seeing the consultant, seeing the nurses, talking about what's going to happen. Obviously this time round it was a longer operation, and we knew that because it was to remove a considerable amount of tissue from various areas within my uterus and surrounding parts, so bladder, bowel, ovary, that sort of situation. So we chatted through all of that. Woke up this time, I woke up and I was toasty. I had this inflatable, heated, felt like a lilo on top of me, keeping me warm, because last time I think I woke up and I was shivering quite a lot, so that was delightful. I was in more pain than I was the last time, but obviously that's to be expected because they actually removed tissue this time, and last time they didn't. They just went in, thought, oh, okay, we haven't got time to do this, and came out again. So that was to be expected also. And then when I spoke to the consultant, he came round and said, yeah, we removed everything that we could. You're going to be quite sore for a couple of weeks, and they gave me a sick note for a couple of weeks, and off I went the same day. Managed to go for a wee. They like you to do that. I think I went for 4 before I left, and that was all fine. And then I came back home with Scott, and Emmie wasn't allowed to lift anything and was really just hobbling around. This time round I had 3 incisions, one in my belly button as all the other times, one to the left, my left of my belly button, which is the same as last time, and then he also went into a 3rd point, which was just at the top of my bikini line, I suppose, which is where one of the incision points from the first laparoscopy I had. So that was all to be expected. The bruising was so much better this time. I hardly bruised at all, so that was great. I had dissolvable stitches, but they say that they like you to have them removed, I think a week after, or 2 weeks, I think it was a week after anyway, because it can slow down healing, and I think it can cause more chance of infection if you don't have them removed. But anyway, all fine. Was feeling a little bit unwell, but just thought, you know what, that's to be expected. I've had anesthesia, I've had quite a lot of tissue removed, my body's probably a little bit in shock. I was on, I got given a couple of different pain meds to take, which were fine. And then I think it was, so I had it done on the Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, so the 4th day after I'd had it done, I woke up. I remember my husband had gone to the driving range, my daughter was at nursery. This was before all of this quarantine stuff, and I was laid in bed and my back was aching so bad. And I just felt unwell. I started to feel a bit shivery, and I just thought, this isn't right. I'd had a really upset tummy for the 4 days prior. Again, I just thought because he'd taken tissue off of my bowel, it's going to have upset it in a way. I've got a bit of a sensitive stomach anyway, and I was struggling to go for a wee as easily as normal. I had to really concentrate. But again, they removed tissue from the tube that connects my kidneys to my bladder and my bladder itself, so I thought, okay, this is normal, that's fine. But it was the feeling unwell and the shivering and the backache that was worrying me a little bit. So I phoned the clinic, decided to run a bath, waited for the clinic to call me back, and the really nice guy on the phone said, I'm just gonna contact your consultant just to tell him what you've told me, to see whether he wants you to come in and be seen by the nurses with regard to me feeling a little bit like it's a struggle to go for a wee. So I'm running the bath, husband comes home, comes and sits upstairs, sits on the toilet whilst I'm in the bath. I've literally just got in the bath and I have no idea what happened, but I was in what I can only describe as full-blown labour. It was like a contraction. I had a contraction and it was the most severe pain I've ever felt in my entire life. And I remember just lying in the bath and it was almost like, it just was like that. And I was like, oh. And I thought, it's okay, it'll go away in a minute. Don't know what's happened, it's gonna go away in a minute. And it did not go away. And the next thing I know is I'm trying to get on all fours in the bath for some relief from this pain. I'm starting to scream. I'm starting to moo like when I was in labour. Like this was serious pain. My husband had no idea what was going on. The guy from the clinic calls him back. My husband's like, so things have got pretty bad. And the guy's like, is that her screaming in the background? And Scott's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, you need to call an ambulance. So then I'm trying to get out the bath. Scott's hanging up the phone, trying to call an ambulance, saying, babe, you've got to stay in the bath. I'm like, I can't. I've got to get out. I've got to lie down. I've got to do something. I cannot be in this water. It is not helping me. So I'm getting out the bath. He's helping me out the bath, trying to call an ambulance at the same time, hobbling into my daughter's bedroom to sit on the rocking chair. And that's sort of kind of helping a little bit. It was almost like coming in waves like contractions do. But obviously I know I'm not pregnant at this point. And there's no baby at the end of this either, so that's not fair. So Scott's called the ambulance. He's also called my mum. My poor mum, she just got back into bed. She'd had a really bad night with blood sugars. And again, Scott rings her and she's like, what is that noise? He's like, that's Harry. And she's like, right. Luckily she only lives around the road. She comes running round. At this point, I've said to Scott, I need you to get me down the stairs. I need to go on the sofa where we had a duvet down there. I need you to get me on the sofa. This was in between screaming. So he's helping me down the stairs. Now my legs are shaking. I'm like so slow. My mum comes running through the door. I'm crying, I'm screaming. Mum takes over. Scott calls the ambulance again because I'm like, where is the damn ambulance? And so I think I was then sat on the sofa with my mum, screaming, crying, mooing for a good 20 minutes. Then the ambulance arrived, came in, they took all my obs. They had to get me to calm down because I think I was panicking a little bit because I was getting pins and needles in my hands when they were trying to do the check my blood pressure. But basically I had a temperature of 37.8, and apparently this was at the time when the virus was around, and he said, look, RUH, which is Bath Hospital, I'm probably gonna get told off for this because we're not supposed to take people in if they've got a temperature of 37.8 and above. And I was obviously exactly at 37.8 degrees Celsius. So he said, I'm going to take you in anyway because I know you've had an operation and it doesn't sound right. It sounds like you've got some kind of infection. The guys were amazing. I had gas and air in the back of the ambulance, which was lovely. The main guy that was driving was pumping the tunes out. We had like 2-pack. We had all, I mean, it was literally M&M. It was the best ambulance ride I've ever had in my life. And I was sucking on that gas and air. Got into A&E. It was dead. There was like hardly anybody in there, which is great. Because obviously there were people being sort of isolated. They isolated me because of my temperature and because I'd had an upset stomach for a few days prior. So I was seen really, really quickly. They took bloods from me. They allowed me to keep on with the gas and air. And no one really said much. They just then said, right, what we're going to do is we're going to put you on an IV, a 48-hour IV of 3 different antibiotics, basically throw everything at you to kill whatever this is. And so that started. They gave me some paracetamol, I think. Then it was time for me to be moved from A&E up to a ward. and I wasn't allowed to take my Gassinet with me, so they promised me I would have some kind of form of morphine when I got up there. Got up there, the morphine was not coming, so I'm in a state. But I was in my own room because I had to be isolated, which was so bizarre because everybody that came in had to wear gloves, they had to wear masks, they had to wear aprons, and it was like I was a leper. The nurses were amazing, no care was compromised at all. It was just a really bizarre experience. And so that was that really. I was there for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and came out Thursday kind of afternoon, so I was in there for a good 4 days. Had the IV antibiotics for 48 hours, they're 3 different kinds, and they checked my blood again and they said, look, we're not happy that it's improved enough, and so they said, okay, we're gonna, and at that point my cannula had fallen out of my arm. I don't know how that's possible, but it had. So they said, okay, we'll move you on to oral antibiotics if that's okay. I was like, yes, that's fine. But every time I was eating, I would get these cramps again in my stomach, so I hardly ate anything. You wouldn't know it because I've piled the weight back on now, but I lost like half a stone in like 3-4 days, and I was just afraid to eat anything. They also didn't want me to have any dairy because it might upset my stomach more, and at this point they didn't know exactly where this infection was. So carried on with the oral antibiotics. I had 2 different types. Is it me making some noises? Then I kept having repeat bloods, and one of the consultants came in and said, okay, so you've had an infection, your bloods have improved enough. Obviously we don't want you to be here unnecessarily because we've got people here that are coming in with COVID, so and they also needed my bed, I'm sure, so we're going to discharge you. If anything gets worse, you feel that the antibiotics aren't working, come straight back. And then I got the discharge note, and on the discharge note it said treated for abdominal sepsis. So that's great, had sepsis on top of everything else, but not one person actually told me that during this whole scenario. And when I got home, I had a letter from the consultant just kind of confirming what had happened, and I'd spoken to the consultant after the operation and he didn't mention this. In the letter it said that he'd accidentally made a small hole in my vagina that he had to stitch up. That's great. So he also had to do this thing where I think they suspend specific organs so that they could get the endometrial tissue off the ureter, which is the tube that connects the kidneys to the bladder. All of these things in this letter pointed to a conclusion that if I'd had this information, it probably would have helped my care at RUH, because I had it done at a different clinic. They're not allowed to share my notes, but I was under the impression that everything went fine and that there was no accidental holes being made, which I've been told since by my consultant that actually increases your chance of infection as well. And that actually it was super invasive, and I felt that because I'd had 2 laparoscopies before, I'd been absolutely fine afterwards, that it was just the same, it was like a minor thing. But actually having read the notes, it was serious. It was a lot of tissue being removed, and I'm not surprised that I ended up in hospital with an infection. But as I said, the care team were great. A few days later we called the paramedics back out because I started to get pain again, but it was more that I actually had a panic attack, I think, because I was so worried that it was all coming back and I was going to get this massive almost contraction like pain again, and I was going to be in that amount of pain again and have to go back into hospital. And we're talking like a week after I'd been in, 2 weeks after I'd been in hospital 1 week after I'd been in hospital, and this whole COVID lockdown was starting, it was ramping up, and so I was thinking I really don't want to be there. They weren't going to let more than one person visit you. I mean, Scott was the only one that came and visited me anyway, because my mum is considered high risk and I didn't want Emmie going in and out of a hospital. I was thinking, what if even Scott wouldn't be able to visit me? I'm just going to be on my own. Just gonna have FaceTime. I missed Emmie so much when I was in there. And it's the small things. You miss like a heavy duvet. You have like the really thin sheet and you just think, oh, I just really want to be in my own bed. But they were great. They said, look, your obs all look fine. I think what you probably need is some harder core painkillers. So got an appointment at the GP that evening, checked me all over, and said, look, I'm gonna prescribe you like 100 tramadol, and take them as you need them because you've been through the wars. And by the looks of the notes from IUH, they just threw the book at you in terms of the antibiotic that they gave you, just to make sure that they got rid of whatever, like wherever this infection was, they needed to get rid of it quick. And so that's that, I suppose. I'm doing a lot better now. I've pretty much got about 3 of those tramadol left. I haven't taken tramadol in over a week now, but I'm telling you, I needed it. It was painful. And I mean, this is the thing, I don't want to put anyone off having a laparoscopy, because laparoscopies, I mean, the one I had before went perfectly well, and there is a small risk that they can do damage, or a small risk that you could get an infection afterwards. And obviously that's going to happen to some people, because it is an operation at the end of the day. I'd obviously been struggling with mental health as well, and just feeling down about the fact that of the pain that the endometriosis was causing me, but then to still be in so much more pain because you're healing. It just takes a while, I think, for everything to settle down for you to then start to feel better. And I do. I feel so much better now. I'm actually going to be starting back to work next week, part-time for a little bit, and then ramp it back up, which I'm really excited about. I've missed everybody so much. Obviously everyone's going to be working from home now as well, which is so bizarre. The entire office is working from home. So respect to the IT department for figuring that out. So it's going to be strange, but obviously I work from home 2 days a week anyway normally, so it's not that different for me. But my husband's at home obviously, and so is my daughter, so that's going to be interesting in terms of noise levels. But I'm really excited to get back to work and yeah, just get back to my life. I feel like my life has been on hold for the last 2 months. And I think maybe I majorly underestimated how much time I would need to recover from such an invasive surgical procedure anyway. And then I unfortunately got the abdominal sepsis. So here I am now, feeling a lot better, ready to carry on and get back to work, and hopefully this whole crazy intense situation of COVID-19 is going to improve and go away at some point. It's just scary, and we're so lucky that I can work from home. Scott's been furloughed, so he works in hospitality, but luckily he's getting 80% of his salary, so we're in such a good position compared to so many other people. And luckily we don't have to pay Emmie's nursery. They're actually open and they're taking key workers' children, so they're still going, and I think they're getting something from the government because of that. So luckily we don't have to pay at the moment. But it's hard with a 2-year-old. She doesn't get it. She doesn't understand why, you know, mum can't come in. She just stands at the door and we have to do exchange of goods and a quick hi and bye. She doesn't get it, and she doesn't get that we can't go to soft play, and if we walk to co-op, she doesn't get that we can't stop and go to the park because it doesn't look like it's closed, but there's no one on it. And it's just explaining that to a 2-year-old. I mean, I'm sure so many of you can relate. But it's, on the flip side, it's really scary, and sometimes I can't sleep. I went through this phase where my body was like jolting me awake at night when I was trying to sleep. And I think it was just anxiety about what's happening and what this means, what this could mean for my friends and family, because we just don't know. People of all ages and health status are unfortunately passing away, and it just makes you think no one is safe from it. And so that's why the social distancing thing is so important. I mean, we do gusto with my mum and dad for 4 meals of the week, And then we went to Lidl and Aldi and stocked up on sort of frozen meats and frozen vegetables so that we didn't have to go out and buy fresh things all the time. Frozen milk for Emmie. So we're trying to go out as little as possible. We're even sometimes not going out for our 1 hour walk a day. We pick a field that's local that we know no one's going to be in. Scott takes his golf club and some golf balls, and Emmie takes a ball, and we just kind of potter around and sing and dance and just try and give her a bit of variety but also some exercise. We're so lucky that the weather's been so amazing here in the UK, so I think we're really lucky, and it's given us time to spend together as a family that we wouldn't have had. But now it's lovely because we're sharing it and we're in a lovely routine, and I get to see so much of Emmie, and she's talking so much, and she says things like, "I love you, mummy," so much. And she wants to hold my hand, her little hand wants to hold my hand, and she's so fiercely independent. She's not always wanted to do that, so I'm taking advantage of that. And so really I think I need to start changing my mindset. Now I feel a lot better, it's a lot easier to do that and think about the positives from every situation, not the negatives. Because it's so easy to think about the negatives when really there's positive in everything. You know, like the time we're getting to spend together, and what, you know, we're getting to see Emmie grow so quickly, and she's so funny. I think it's going to be crazy when all this goes back to normal, and I'm going back to the office, Emmie's back at nursery, Scott's going back to work and doing his shifts at night time. It's going to be weird, but at the moment we're just going to make the most of it, and I hope you guys are too. I think that's it for today. Thank you so much, guys. See you later. Bye. You gonna say hello?
Hello. Cheese.
Good girl. Gonna wipe your face?
Is
I know. Good job. I'm gonna sing.
twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
Up above the,
Baby,
like a diamond.
in the sky,
Twinkle, twinkle.
little star, how I wonder.
Watch you.
Oh, sound noise.
What about ABC?
A, B, C, D, F, G, Charlie,
LM.
Hola, P,
Yeah. Q.
O, S,
T.
U, V,
W.
X,
Y and
Z.
good girl.
Close your eyes, get some rest. I'm by your side. Lay your head on my chest. I know you've had a really bad day. But I'm right here, it's gonna be okay. The world could fall down, it's gonna be okay. The sun could go out, we're gonna be okay. If all the blue skies fade to gray, we're gonna be okay. Calm your soul, hold my hand, don't let go. I understand. I know it hurts, for now, so don't despair. The world could fall down.